This is the ideal time for serious discussion right after both a lunch break and some networking sessions. This is, just to recall, the 16th summit of the Baltic Development Forum and the 5th annual forum of the EU Strategy for the Baltic Sea. Numerically, maybe the Baltic Development Forum is a little bit ahead in its summits, but the EU Annual Forum is trying to catch up, and we do have a parity among these two projects today and tomorrow. Now, what we are going to discuss right now is our digital future, and as we saw from the introductory sessions, our future is digital, and this is where high-value growth potential lies. So we would now like to find out from our speakers how to make it a reality. And we have a splendid lineup this afternoon, starting with two Prime Ministers of Finland and Estonia, whom I would like to welcome very warmly. Jyrki Katainen, Prime Minister of Finland. Welcome. Taavi Roivas, Prime Minister of Estonia. Warm welcome.
The rock stars, welcome.
Yeah. And we're going to be joined as well by Shank, who is Vice President and General Counsel of Microsoft.
Welcome to the stage, Craig.
Craig, hello. Hello. Jørgen Bardenfleth, who is Chairman of the Board of Symbion in Denmark.
Welcome to the stage.
Hello, hello. Vinay Venkatraman, who is CEO of Leapcraft in Denmark as well.
Welcome, nice to meet you.
Hello, Vinay. Hi. And last but not least, Wolf-Dietrich Grussmann from the European Commission. Warm welcome. Hello, hello, hello. Now, gentlemen, please be seated. And to get us going, I would like to ask Prime Minister Katainen, who has had a distinguished career in the Finnish government and who is tipped by the Financial Times as the leading candidate to take over as European Commission President. So he's not going to speak about that. I'm not even for a moment suggesting this, but whatever his future role in Brussels is going to be, it's going to be a digital future, one way or the other. So, Jyrki Katainen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let's not believe in rumors. Let's look at forward and to future today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving us opportunity to talk about probably one of the most important topic for all the countries in Europe, but also one of the most important topic for the next Commission. Because we all agree that we need more jobs, more growth, and first thing what we have to choose is whether we believe the growth can be get by public policy or by strengthening private sector. And I believe the latter one. And that's why I have been thinking what the policymakers can really do boosting, for instance, ICT sector or digital agenda. We have to make sure that we don't interfere to private sector's area, but also we have to make sure that we invest in right things in order to strengthen private sector's capability to invest in future. So policymakers usually want to take advantage of all the possible positive things what is happening around us, and we sometimes imagine too much about our capability to create economic growth. But now we are in a situation in whole European area that we have to concentrate on the issues which strengthen our competitiveness, which strengthen the business climate and surrounding instead of spending more public money to support or subsidize businesses. So what policymakers or private sector together could do in order to strengthen a digital agenda, The first thing, of course, is digital single market in Europe. I don't go through all the concrete measures or proposals what the current commission has already done. It has done an excellent job on this, and we have timetables and everything. So now it's more or less a question of implementation. VAT payment, online payment, and so on are very crucial. The second point which I would like to pay attention is funding for small and medium-sized enterprises. And it's very easy to agree with the paper or the summary of the paper which we have been dealing with today, which says that we should devise new facilities for small and medium-sized enterprises, for instance, crowdfunding platform also. So the general surrounding for small and medium-sized enterprises and entrepreneurship, more generally speaking, is one of the core issues. E-signature should be taken in use in all the European countries. And also the investments like sea cable, which will happen from Finland to Germany, which strengthen the data protection and fast data connection between the continents or the countries. Those are the issues in which public sector can be helpful. My final point, or the second final point, is universities. I believe in universities also in this issue. Traditionally, in Finland, universities have been place for principal research, which is and which will be the university's primary job also in the future. And there we have been educating people for professions. But now we have started seeing very positive steps towards entrepreneurship, because universities are becoming hubs or home bases for entrepreneurship, especially startup entrepreneurship. And this is the first time, I would like to say, the first time in our university's history where the principal research, entrepreneurship, and venture capitalists are shaking hands. Mm-hmm. And this is what I believe the most could change. For instance, the growth surrounding, business surrounding, and also digital agenda. Finnish universities have managed to create a surrounding where, for instance, venture capitalists have wanted to come from different countries. And this is maybe the final point, that when creating new business surrounding, when creating digital economy, it must be done with market players, because public sector cannot create market, but market players can create market, and public sector's role is to support that it is possible to happen. So that's why digital agenda must be market-driven development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We won't let you go that easily. And if I can ask you a couple of questions on what you have said, because you mentioned at the beginning that the government, the public authorities need to invest in the right things. This sounds a little bit like an idea which was around in the debate a few years ago of creating lead markets. Which to my mind was very sensible. You need to create conditions for certain markets to emerge. It won't happen by itself. The government needs to give a helping hand. So is that what you were referring to, or is your thinking a little bit different? And on the digital agenda, in the context of the future commission, whatever its composition, obviously, you mentioned the role of implementation. Does this mean that you think the legal aspects are pretty much catered for, and what Europe needs is more enablers of the digital agenda?
Yeah, the public sector's role, I count together the EU and governments. the digital single market, it is not ready, but we more or less know what should be done. And that's why I say that it's more or less a question of implementation, because the Commission has listed a huge amount of measures which are under preparation at the moment, or then at least we know what should be done. So there we can create a better business surrounding for all the European companies. The second point, what the public sector can do, is the concrete decisions like what the Estonian government has done. E-signature, actually we did it together between the countries. We are the first country pair who has done a state agreement by using e-signature. So by creating this kind of surrounding and platform, it is what the public sector can do. Of course, if talking about entrepreneurship, more generally speaking, then we can do something like make sure that there are financing for growth, or just take care of competitiveness and stuff like this. But I wouldn't like to create digital single market so that the legislators are creating a huge amount of new regulation and we are spending huge amount of public money or taxpayers' money. Instead, we should make sure that our countries are competitive enough, and we just rather take the obstacles away than create new regulations.
Thank you very much. Now, Prime Minister Taavi Roivas, let me welcome you, if it is not too late given your recent appointment to the Baltic Sea family, and congratulate you on your recent appointment. Now, when I think of Estonia, an anecdote comes to mind, which was mentioned to me by a Danish ambassador, and apparently there were some academic tests in Denmark done about the usage of the brain. And the conclusion was that the Danes now use full capacity of the brains and there's no scope for progress. I think of Estonia in the same fashion with respect to the digital economy, that you have probably achieved almost everything. Have you, or do you still have ambitions to go forward?
Well, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I think we are still scratching the top of the iceberg. We still have huge potential, and this doesn't apply only for Estonia, not only for Finland, but for our region as a whole. I think if you look at our region from Central Europe, Southern Europe, you will see not only the very beautiful nature that is very unique, and it's a good, especially visible also here in the Turku area and this wonderful archipelago that you have here, but you also see that we are some kind of digital world, especially if you look from those countries who think that internet is something you should charge for €6 a day or something like that, which is something that we don't understand at all. We consider internet human right, and thus it should be accessible everywhere and for everyone. But coming to the topic, I totally agree with Prime Minister Katainen that private sector is the one who makes most of development and generates growth, and we are both very much pro-market politicians, and also arguments are backing us. If I look at the Estonian statistics, 20% of value add in our economy is actually generated by the ICT companies. So 20% of the additional value add, the growth of value add is generated by the ICT companies whose share in the economy is much smaller actually, but the value add part and the additional value add is very, very high. I also believe that the conditions in Finland, in Estonia, but in our region as a whole are very good for the next very big and very important tech companies to emerge. And I'm quite sure that the next Rovio and the next Skype are already there. You all don't just know which companies are the next Skypes and Rovios, but they are already here, and our task as politicians is to help them to fulfill their dreams. What else can public sector do besides generating infrastructure, generating a business climate that is favorable for startups? In addition to that, of course, we come to the basic infrastructure digitally, which means that that we do need a secure way to understand each of you, who is you online. If we have a 100% certain way to know that Taavi Roivas is Taavi Roivas online without showing a paper passport, which, by the way, is not 100% secure. If you do have a 100% secure way doing that online without showing your face, but having your chip or chip together with a PIN that is your personal code or any other technological solution, then you can build on that a lot. I'm a little bit amazed that Estonia and Finland are the only two countries who have a digital signature that can be used in both countries. Why am I amazed? I'm not surprised that we are the first. I know that we are the most advanced in the world in this sense, and I'm not surprised at all. But I'm amazed that why on earth don't others follow? Technologically, there are so many countries that are much more advanced in terms of potential to invest in technology. I think they could afford similar technical solutions, but I think what they lack is perhaps the courage to take these decisions and to go forward with the political part of this generating this infrastructure. About half a year ago, I was in Finlandia Talo when there was an event organized by Sitra, and Eric Topol, an American e-health guru, was in front of a large audience like here today, and he told that Estonia and Finland, looking from American perspective or looking from across the Atlantic, have the most potential, and that I hope this applies, and I believe that applies to all of our region in terms of generating cross-border solutions. And in terms of e-health, that could mean that if a Finn is on a vacation in Estonia and has some need for a prescription, or has some, I hope this doesn't happen, but has some condition that has to be treated in a hospital, then the doctor in Estonia could see the medical file and could really be sure that the Finn in Estonia is treated right. Very practical thing. I'm not even telling about the potential for all the companies. You know, I work 300 meters from the parliament building. The government building is 300 meters. And I sign all the laws, all the proposals, everything digitally. And already from this 300-meter distance, we save tremendous amount of money and time because we don't send drivers with cars to present those laws. Imagine what we can do if Estonians and Finns cannot only with each other, that we can do already, and Prime Minister Katainen has done that already with the previous Estonian Prime Minister, but if we can sign, and the Estonian and Portuguese and Finnish and American companies can sign documents together without meeting each other in person. So I really believe that our region that has a huge potential in digital world should first of all be continuously ambitious and to push further forward the digital ambition of the European Union as such. Every politician in European Union is talking about digital single market. Everyone. I'm quite sure that Jyrki knows very well what this actually means. I'm not sure about all others. So I really hope that when they speak about digital, we have a chance with Prime Minister Katainen to show them what that actually is, and to present that there are practical values to that. This is not just a hip word to say that let's become digital. This is a real save of public resources. This is real potential for GDP. And I will end my first remarks by saying that we have calculated that that in Estonia we save the amount of 2% of GDP annually while using digital services. I think all European countries are currently struggling with growth, and if we have a clear potential for additional growth, I think we should use that. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Prime Minister Roivas, now I get the honor of asking you a question. It's very inspirational, both speeches. And I'm American from birth, and it wakes a little bit of man on the moon kind of mentality in me. So my question to you is, and maybe you can consult with your neighboring prime minister, if you were to kind of issue a goal that you want for the Baltic Sea region, a man on the moon kind of goal with regards to the digital economy, what might that be?
Man on the moon. Well, let's have the man first using digital services. This would be a very practical and a very easy thing to do, and we don't have to invent the wheel in this respect. Estonia and Finland are the first two countries that are currently working on a cross-border solutions, which means that we will be the first two countries in the world to have mutual digital world. You know, we have the Schengen area in Europe. You don't need to show your passport. You can travel freely. But online, you can't do that. You need to use huge fight huge obstacles if you want to, for example, start a company in another country, if you want to use the internet banking in other countries, so on and so forth. I think what we are doing currently here with those two countries, but also Latvia and Lithuania are doing the same, so it will really be our region's thing, is something for, I don't know if it's too much to say, but I think probably not. We are very modest people, as you know, Estonia, like Finns, but it's probably not too much to say that it could be a role model for the rest of Europe as well to start using cross-border digital services. This would be really something that would make Europe unite and really to use the full potential of Europe.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. The Baltic Development Forum and the Estonian government prepared a report a couple of years ago about how the Baltic Sea region could take the digital agenda forward through enhanced cooperation. And I think many of the conclusions of that report, as you have indicated, remain valid. So I'm speaking from self-interest, being Polish. My basic self-interest is for you not to limit yourselves just to the Estonian-Finnish cooperation, but get us all inspired in the Baltic Sea region. So thank you very much. We would now like to present a special report which was drafted by PricewaterhouseCoopers for Baltic Development Forum and Microsoft. And it covers an essential dimension of this phenomenon, namely how to expand your business abroad, being a small and medium-sized enterprise, and using internet. The internet allows for this to happen, but a number of conditions needs to be fulfilled. And I would like to invite to the stage Magnus Kolsjö, partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, who will take us through the recommendations of this report.
Thank you very much. I think I just got a very big promotion, but I'm senior manager at PricewaterhouseCoopers, but thank you very much. I'll tell my boss. It's a great privilege for me to be here today to give you a brief introduction to the report searching for the micro multinational. We have looked at several SMEs, small and medium-sized companies within the wider ICT sector in the information society. We have interviewed 150 small and medium-sized businesses in Malmö, Copenhagen, Helsinki, and Tallinn, and we have pored over a lot of statistical information and comparative studies. I'll leave the reading of the report to you. I hope you find it inspiring and interesting, and I will dive into our recommendations. this one. Our objective in formulating these have been to address as many issues as possible that goes cross-border in the Baltic Sea region and that are important for SMEs aspiring to become micro-multinationals. It is not a detailed roadmap for every recommendation, but it's these ideas that require further studies and preparation. It should also be noted, and I think this is important, that there are a not insignificant number of the companies we have interviewed that do not have the intention or wish to grow or expand their business. And this is important to know, since public policies in these cases may not have the desired effect. We have seen, and this is the first recommendations, many SMEs express difficulties to secure specialized skill and personnel possessing a broad range of knowledge. Therefore, our first recommendation is something with a very long and complicated name, but we call it the Baltic Sea Region Information Society Business Academy. It is a niche education forum or an academy where universities and companies come together to organize educational activities for SMEs in the Baltic Sea region. This can include educational programs with courses in technology, but also in business skills, and it will also give an opportunity for SMEs to come together and network with each other. Second, we suggest to lower the requirements for the European Blue Card. The Blue Card is an ill fit for many SMEs looking to hire foreign staff with skills relevant for their growth strategies. We suggest to lower the requirements to an absolute minimum. For example, a valid work contract or a binding job offer matching the person's qualifications and a salary equivalent to acceptable living standards. Thirdly, bring an SME abroad. Several of the companies we talked to told us that their international journey began when they had a chance to follow a larger company abroad. So see this as becoming a micro-multinational by piggybacking on a larger company, and in that way give important introductions and knowledge, as well as access to new markets. We have talked about what networks are important for the SMEs. And they say the most important to help them are the ones where they can discuss actual challenges and lessons learned with their peers. So our fourth recommendation is therefore a cross-border peer-to-peer coaching network, a channel for these SMEs to learn about regional differences from SMEs in other countries. And we believe there is already a seed for this, a foundation to build on in the Enterprise Europe network. When an SME goes abroad, they will find new challenges. There might be similar issues they face in their home market, but the answers might be different. And maybe their traditional advisors can't help them. This is why we suggest the cross-border business checks, a consumer choice system with pre-screened and publicly procured business services that can help them in the new markets. Our sixth recommendation is the Baltic Sea Region crowdfunding platform. Many of the interviewees have told us about difficulties to secure financing for development and for growth. Through the crowdfunding platform, there will be a possibility, or there can be a possibility, to combine microfinancing with smart money and also to use, for example, the business attaché network for marketing and leveraging the platform abroad. SMEs are not very good at government, and governments are not very good at entrepreneurship. But instead of SMEs adapting to government and public officials need to learn how to better understand and help entrepreneurs and small businesses grow and prosper. It would be a good investment to invest in a comprehensive channel strategy for the points of single contacts that exist throughout the European Union, and combine this with efforts to increase the understanding for entrepreneurs among the civil servants. Lastly, I'm going to say something about taxes. Our SMEs have talked a lot about them. We, however, only suggest a small, but we believe helpful change. A tax reduction for business support services. Many SMEs have told us that they are not able to pay for the help they will need to grow since the professional services are too expensive for them. We therefore suggest a tax deduction up to a certain amount for the cost for specific types of business services, similar to what is possible, for example, in Sweden and Finland for home services to private individuals. And with that very brief introduction to the study, I hope I made you a bit wiser as to what we recommend in our report. Thank you.
Thanks. Before we let you leave the stage, I was just wondering, you need a microphone there. I was wondering if you could react a bit on how your recommendations match with some of the points that we heard from the two prime ministers in their introductory addresses.
As one area I was very interested here, I've been working with e-government for many, many years, and that is what I normally do daily. And I think it ties in very well to the businesses. And I think especially when you talk about your digital identity and to have an e-identity that actually works for real, and also to identify the roles you have. Because in business, not only who you are as a person is important, but also what roles you have in your organization. Mm-hmm. So I think it is an important work that is being done in the European Union, and it could maybe go a little bit faster. But I'm really impressed of the work you've done together with in Finland and Estonia. And in Sweden, we're way behind. It was my headache at the Minister of Finance for many years, and now it's someone else's. But it's very interesting, the work you do.
Thank you very much, Magnus. Thanks. Now we're going to turn to our two entrepreneurs, our business colleagues here in the panel, Vinay and Craig. I'm going to start with you, Vinay, if that's okay. So we've heard a lot about what recommendations to make a stronger digital society and get growth through digitization. And we've also heard from the two prime ministers it needs to be business-led, and we need to facilitate for the entrepreneurs to grow, to come into being and grow. I was wondering how you react to all the different recommendations and comments, and if you had something to elaborate on or prioritize or something else that hasn't been brought up.
So, well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm pretty amazed that there's such an interesting discussion going on all day about this. There's a sort of a metaphorical saying that if you're trying to do a startup, you're trying to bootstrap yourself, there's usually three sources of funding, right? There's the 3 Fs, the friends, family, and fools, right? I'm actually very amazed that there's a lot of policy level thinking going on in massaging the friends and the fools into investing into your business, you know? It's, I think the key takeaway for me is that entrepreneurs on the street don't think about policies. They're not thinking about how to fit into some program or how do you engage with businesses at a very strategic way. So usually it's a game of survival, and it's a game of growth. And I personally had an interesting moment of epiphany this morning when I realized that I was trying to do a check-off of all the people in my team, and I realized that actually the bulk of my team actually comes from the Baltic region. We have amazing programmers from Poland, Estonia, a really great tech team. I originally come from India. And it's really an interesting sort of confluence that came together. And just to think about the fact that we recently got a new client, a Dutch multinational. And it's a very interesting case because the technology for the products that we're developing comes from mostly from Japan and Taiwan. The programming talent actually comes from this part of the world. The market is China, where it's going to be sold. And we're based in Copenhagen. It's a very, very strange business, right? So I think this notion of a micro multinational is, I think, completely exemplified in these kinds of examples. And I really love this notion because I think that's more or less where values are created, is in this cross-cultural confluence that can be created. And all those initiatives that both the prime ministers have mentioned, I think, go a long way in smoothing the roads, like sort of, you know, like there are no bumps on the roads, so that's perfect. But I think the real question for me, as a sort of a person who tries to create companies and institutions, is that once the road is smooth, what happens next? How do you take off is the big question. And I think that's where the entrepreneurial culture of an entire region has to be thought through. which is more of a socio-cultural value rather than economic prospect purely. And I think we've heard lots and lots of examples of how economic prospects can be made and some really nice recommendations. But I think if the average entrepreneur who has to go into high value growth has to look into sort of what are the new markets, how do you reorganize yourself in new economies, and how do you enhance the value propositions that you can offer through totally new offerings. And I think that's even better captured because today small companies out of nowhere can access the same degree of technology and the same degree of access that the big companies around the globe are able to. And a recent example that I always love giving is Dropbox. Came out of nowhere, a bunch of guys got together, decided that they have to make file sharing immensely easy. And now, yesterday, at the WWDC conference, and Apple has come up with strategies to sort of mitigate this new risk that's looming on the horizon. That speaks volumes about how small businesses can certainly dramatically change the value chain of international business. So I think all the points that I heard so far, they all, I think, in my head, they check the check boxes off, which is great to get the baseline going. But I think we need to move beyond the baseline. That's my overall understanding from this.
Okay. You mentioned in your comments just now about that not all the small companies have the knowledge or the access to the technology as the big companies do. And it makes me make a link into one of the recommendations about take a small company with you, working together with a larger company. So now I'm going to turn to Craig and get a little bit your reactions to that recommendation in particular, and maybe a bit about how you all are working with an ecology of small companies, if you are, or how you're working to help grow the digital ecosystem.
Sure. First, thanks for the invite. Thanks for the question, Emily. I think and this is an interesting area for Microsoft because fundamentally, in many ways, small business fuels our growth, but Microsoft fuels small business growth at the same time. So here in the Baltic Sea region, Microsoft has about 13,000 partners employing about 100,000 people. And as a consequence, our future is intricately intertwined with those small businesses. And I think to Vinay's point, we look to innovation from our own resources, but we also look to innovation in that ecosystem. It's a critical ecosystem for us, and we recognize that not all of the innovation in the world is going to come from Redmond, Washington. Nobody would be that foolish to suggest it. It's really important to us to have that entire ecosystem very well functioning. And as I think about that, some of the things that then carry me further into the study, Emily, are topics around talent and talent gaps that we foresee. I looked at the first 4 or 5 recommendations, and I really think of it as sort of the underpinnings for a conversation about a regional technology strategy, maybe leading to a European European talent strategy, maybe leading to a European talent strategy. If you think about where we are today in the industry as a whole, the industry created about 6 million jobs in the last 5 years. Universities graduated about half that many capable computer science majors. We are not going to make it if we keep running at those rates. And that means some near-term issues like being really thoughtful about talent movement and some long-term issues being really thoughtful about talent development. But I would put some of those things together and think about them as important features of a thriving ecosystem, not just for Microsoft, but here across the Baltic Sea region. And I'm particularly inspired at some of the things you're already looking at across the Baltic Sea region. I'm particularly inspired about some of the, we look at a lot of work on policy for innovation. We sometimes miss the opportunity for innovation in policy. And one of the keys here for us is innovation in policy around moving systems and data across borders. And I'm thrilled with the work that you've done already, and we're really eager to support that work on a wider ecosystem basis across other sets of borders. anyway, those were some of my initial thoughts.
That's very interesting. A follow-up question to both of you. Okay, if talent is lacking, or there's not enough of people to fill all of these ideas and build all of these companies and grow, is the Baltic Sea region home in mass? Is there the potential in the set of countries? Or what other recommendations would you have to both improve the mobilization and the development of talent? And are there any areas in particular?
Do you want me to go? I'll jump in with a couple of quick thoughts. I mean, I think the first point is the reason that Microsoft is so heavily invested here in this region is because of the talent. And it is just such a tremendously rich pool of talent. Vinay has been able to hire so many people out of this market. We've invested almost $20 billion over the last 10 years in companies in the Baltic Sea region. Nokia, Skype, the fast search service in Sweden, and Navision in Denmark. Those are because of the talent, not just the technology. It is talent that is skilled technologically and talent that has heart, soul, and a connection to reality. And this is important. These are not just technically trained individuals. These are people who have breadth. And one of the things that I love is a program that's going on now at Aalto University here in Finland that actually takes the engineering students and helps round out their education with interdisciplinary projects so that you ensure that you don't have just a technically trained skill set. I guess what I would look to most importantly for me is more and more of those things scaled across the region.
Vinay, anything to add?
You'll have more and more concrete ideas.
I think one of the most outstanding value propositions for me personally in this region is this unusual combination of really radical, deep technology with creative industries.
Yeah.
I think this does not come across very easily in other places in the world. I lived in lots of different places, and I can tell you that finding this crossover sort of economy is pretty hard. So I think that's a very interesting springboard to be on. The question is, how do you train the next generation of talent to fit into these kinds of new businesses? You know, like that's the real question mark. I think there is a lot of great initiatives in universities, but I think there's a lot that happens outside the universities which are equally interesting. And I think the two have to sort of come together in some interesting confluence. And I think that powerhouse is yet to be released in this region. That's my sense. I feel like it's a balloon that's being like blown up steadily. It's just not there yet to explode. But I think it'll release as soon as all these infrastructural issues are sorted out, all this communication and smoothness in the systems are worked out. And I want to reiterate this whole notion of an ecosystem. I think that is super crucial. And I think a big factor of the ecosystem is not just government policy and how the frameworks are set up, but also the role of big companies in any ecosystem.
Yeah.
And they're like, you can imagine a big company in an ecosystem like this to be either like a tree that does not let anything else grow around, or a tree that lets a lot of other plants to flourish around it. So the question really becomes, is that what kind of trees are there in the ecosystem? And I have a personal example from, at least in the Danish context, in my previous startup, a big part of success could be attributed of a company to one company, one huge company, and that's Novo Nordisk. It's like this enormous Danish pharmaceutical. And I can't think of any creative industry in Denmark which has not been touched by a company that makes insulin. Can you imagine that? Like, where's the sort of connection there? So I think the real question really becomes is, how do you create policies that let an ecosystem flourish that has both these big trees and these young saplings coming out of nowhere that can grow in the same environment?
Vinay and Craig, thanks very much. I feel reassured because there is a scarce story in the debates, and the scarce story is that the innovation garage is moving from small companies to big companies. That big companies have actually mastered the skill of arriving at the innovation they need, while in the future they've taken that from small companies. But you are saying that's not so bad, that synergies by and large exist, and the value added is mutual. Now I want to turn to Jørgen with with a question concerning, what do we do next? Because companies in the region, when they want to grow, they still very often tend to go to the US because the opportunities are not as big, because they hit the ceiling of funding very often. The venture capital market in Europe is still relatively modest. So what needs to happen to keep these companies in Europe, in the Baltic Sea region, and allow them to grow?
Also, thanks for inviting me here. I don't think that we can actually stop companies going global from moving part of the company to the US or to the Far East. I think it's natural for companies seeking interesting markets to go to the US, and I think you'll see successful companies moving part of their operations, particularly marketing, sales, and others. I think the key question is, can we actually make the Baltic region as attractive as they will stay for the bigger part or the more important part here? And I had an opportunity to travel to both Boston and Silicon Valley a couple of months ago, and was actually pretty reassured of talking to high-tech companies in both places out of Northern Europe origin, and saying, no, we actually like staying partly behind and having our operations, maybe some R&D in the Northern Europe, because we have access to talent and we have access to also testing. So the test bed, I think, is an important too. In my Symbion function as a chairman there, we have actually had some entrepreneurs traveling from faraway places to come and actually set up shop for half years and actually do their development, for instance, in Denmark, because they have access to our welfare system, to our hospitals in a different way than they had in their home country. So access to talent, access to places where you can actually test out your solutions and keep operations, keep R&D, I think is the opportunity. And then we shouldn't be crying when companies are going global and moving part of their operations out of the Northern Europe. That's part of going global.
Yep, thanks very much. And finally, Wolf-Dietrich, if you could now give us the European perspective. The European Commission has done a tremendous job in the last couple of years pushing the digital agenda forward, as we have heard from Prime Minister. But what remains to be done? What do you think the next Commission should treat as a matter of priority, and how much of that can be realized within the strategy for the Baltic Sea region?
Okay, let me first of all thank you also for having the opportunity to be here and to share with this very honorable panel as well as the very knowledgeable audience. It's a pleasure for me to be here in Turku. Your question would lead to probably a long, a long statement. Let me first of all sum up a little bit where we are coming from, and I think what is important, in particular in this area, also because it's widely acknowledged, and we heard from the speakers before, that is how important the digital economy is for our overall success. And I think it's an important common view on this. We have figures that a real digital economy could provide for 4% GDP growth up to 8% GDP growth until 2020. That we would save 110 billion every year if we had a real digital single market. And I think the importance has already been acknowledged also by the policy of the outgoing Commission, in particular the Agenda 2020 and the Digital Agenda for Europe that you mentioned. And I think that the Baltic countries in particular were one of the front runners here also to take on board these ideas and to promote them and to actively contribute to them, fully being aware of the benefits of a, in particular, digital single market for a country where small and medium enterprises play an important role, where you have a small national market, where you have to, of course, to extend to get the necessary scales, and where you have to be innovative as much as possible to be competitive in a global competition. Now, this digital agenda for Europe is also followed up with what we call our key performance indicators, and this is the Digital Agenda Scoreboard. And that has just been published last week, so I have to come up with some of the results to share with you, in particular as regards the Baltic Sea countries. And I think there are main achievements where you can be rather proud of. Let me just say, overall broadband take-up is the highest in Finland at the moment. 90-70% coverage with more than 30 megabits per second you have in Lithuania. The highest take-up in ultra-fast broadband, meaning from 100 megabits per second, is at the moment in Latvia, followed by Sweden. Denmark is leading in small and medium enterprise online selling, and as well as the percentage of the population using e-government services. And Finland and Sweden are leading in private and public research and development spending. So you have the whole bunch of the digital agenda goals where you see that in this region there is a real very innovative and dynamic development to be looked at. However, we have remaining issues, and those concern overall Europe, but also that region, which are, first of all, that in fixed broadband we still have problems in the rural areas. This concerns also Finland and Latvia, for instance. And then I think one alarming sign of the last scoreboard was that the use of the internet by SMEs in particular. This is one of our indicators. And there we see that their member states are falling well behind what is the target. I mean, this is also true for Estonia and Latvia to some extent. It's not the case for Denmark, Lithuania, and Sweden. But just to give you the figures, we have now 72% of population using internet regularly. So this is close to the target of 75. We have 47% buying online, again, close to the target of 50. Even 12% buying cross-border, but only 14% of SMEs selling online. We have a target of 33. And I think that's something to be taken into account, and that brings me also to the conclusions of or recommendations of the study that we heard. And I think I noted that e-skills on one hand and cross-border cooperation, so these were two major topics that were mentioned to be addressed. And also in that regard, I think the Commission has already taken initiatives, just to mention the Grand Coalition initiative of last year, for instance, where we hope to get a cooperation with the enterprises, the Enterprise Europe network, and the point of single contact established by the Services Directive was already mentioned and is mentioned in the study itself. Other initiatives were mentioned, I think, but I would like to summarize as well. It's the Single European Payment Area. It's an important one, which now should take effect this year. We have reviewed the Public Sector Information Directive, which is now also due for transposition, and guidelines are to be established this year. We have just approved in March the e-invoicing directive. I think also an important piece for public procurement. I think public procurement was one of the conclusions of the 2012 summit, how important it is to ensure cross-border public procurements. The e-IDAS regulation just adopted now, which will replace the e-signature directive, and one directive on measures to reduce the costs for broadband rollout, which was also just adopted now and published in the OJ a few days ago, and which should save 30 to 60 billion euros for the costs, for the private costs. And I agree with the Prime Minister. Most of these investments that we need for broadband infrastructure will need to come from the private sector, and though we tried to find ways to reduce their costs. We still have things to be done that concerns, I would say, the demand side. So a copyright review is still under discussion, and we hope to come to a conclusion, at least from the Commission side, during this year. We have the data protection regulation in Parliament and Council, which we have not yet completed, but is, I think, an important pillar to create trust, which is also something which is a pillar to ensure growth in that sector. And of course, we have our famous telecom single market draft regulation, which was in first reading in Parliament, and contains things like ending the roaming within the single market, ensuring net neutrality, and give end users even a better level of protection. So I think these are the main issues at stake at the moment. Of course, some of those will be needed to follow up with the new college. And of course, there are then things to be thought beyond that. And beyond, I certainly will lead to the question of further convergence between content and infrastructure on one hand. It's the role of the over-the-top and the label playing field with the electronic communication sectors. So there is still a lot of scope for further initiatives. I think that's one of my personal experience, that this is a sector which is such innovative and dynamic that you always need to think ahead already well in advance, otherwise you get lost by that. And I think the Baltic region's contribution will be well appreciated, one, because I think we are sure to have you as an alliance for all these initiatives in order to bring forward Europe to what we want.
Thank you very much, Wolf-Dietrich. I don't know about you, Emily, but I feel that not only does the digital agenda save money to governments, but also we are right on time talking about the digital agenda. Well, there must be something to it. And this means that
It's time to open up for questions from the audience. You actually have time to pose your own questions. We have yes? Hands up anywhere?
we have 4 microphones. Yes, there is a head. If you could, oh yes, the microphone is going towards you. It's number 2.
Thank you. I'm Ea Blomqvist from Åbo Academy, representing the role of the universities, and it's quite obvious this is something new, but anything new. But we all know by now that there is a really strong need to transform curricula and the whole role of higher education in a way to provide our students with the skills and abilities to serve all sectors for a sustainable development. Not only, of course, they have to have their special skills, but beside that, they will not be very successful if they are not able to communicate with other disciplines or other cultures. So this is a challenge for not only my own university, but universities all over to, beside do their top science work, also take the responsibility to educate the new generation for multi-talent skills. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the gentleman in the second row. By the way, you can also, this being a digital agenda session, send us a question by Twitter.
Yes.
The hashtag is right there. We will pick it up. Please.
My name is Kai Juhl Petersen from Denmark. I had the pleasure of being the chair of the previous group within the Baltic Development Forum with the previous report. One of our strong sponsors was Prime Minister Ansip from Estonia. So I want to ask the Prime Ministers if what he said to us was, from a politician point of view, first you start to simplify things before you start to digitize. I strongly believe that that is a mantra that we should all stick to, that it's very necessary to simplify things before you actually get the advantages of a digital society.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Could be comments, could be a question. No, the last chance. Well, I will want to add one question about skills to this list, because when Wolf-Dietrich gave us the figures about broadband infrastructure, I kept on thinking about how it matches with the ability of the citizens to take advantage of it. And sometimes the match is pretty good, but sometimes it is not. And then at what stage should we be thinking about this? We could start with the Prime Ministers.
Yeah, first of all, about the education volumes, it's of course in the interest of all the governments to match the need of working life or companies and the number of pupils or students in different areas. I think, at least in Finland, we have never succeeded to estimate the future. So we have changed the societies or the system so that, especially in vocational level, the education organizers are discussing more and more with the company level, because they can tell or do a better foresight than public sector can do, and it is just a reasonable thing to do. Of course, universities tries to live in the same field, but may I also comment a little bit what the colleague said, especially from Baltic Sea region point of view. Every time when I travel abroad, I mean, when I travel outside Europe, I'm giving lectures in which I show a picture of Baltic Sea. And I'm trying to, especially when I'm talking to business society in different parts of the world, I'm showing that look at the countries around Baltic Sea and look at the facts or statistics, like least corrupted area, in the best third in the international competitiveness ranking, how much the countries are using R&D, or the companies in the countries are using money for R&D, internal, very fully or almost fully integrated internal market. People are moving from country to country quite well if looking at how much money is spent for education and stuff like this. So we are the best part of Europe, at least. and that's why I think there are many things which are already quite good in our region. Of course, there are plenty of issues which should be changed. For instance, this digital agenda, and because the world around us is changing, we have to change. But I think it's more like a matchmaking than reforming everything. And there I see big companies' opportunities as a crucial player, because you try to create new things. In order to win the market, you need small and medium-sized companies to create innovations. You know what public policymakers should do, and you know the opportunities in different countries in this region. So I would encourage you to be even more active towards universities, toward education organizations, and kind of play a role. You'd advise us what should be changed, or what are the main issues which does not function properly. So we wouldn't spend too much taxpayers' money for nothing, and we need straight advices from your side.
May I just note a couple of things very quickly?
Of course.
I think it's a great comment, and I actually think it is a role that industry can play. Industry can play large players, and industry should probably learn how to play that role as smaller participants. But this is something that we've done here in Finland in partnership with Nokia just a couple of years ago, investing in Aaltos University,
yeah, exactly.
at the app campus, where actually we together with the Finnish government and Nokia and Microsoft, we collectively raised $18 million
exactly.
to put into the app ecosystem. And I thought that was a really interesting example. We have to learn to scale that. We have to learn to do that more broadly. And we have to get others engaged in playing those roles. But I do think there is a real opportunity there. It is unique here in the Baltic Sea region. And I do want to call attention to that, because we see three main poles outside the US for major software development and innovation. So the South India region, Bangalore, Hyderabad. It's essentially East China, Shanghai, and the Baltic Sea region. You see three poles in the US, but of those three, the one that is most tuned to breadth, entrepreneurial, really thoughtful software development, really thoughtful technology development, really is this region. And some of it is the existing education system, some of it is the existing talent pool, some of it is cultural, some of it is very, very powerful infrastructure and government sponsorship. But I do think as we tell you, well, we're going to need more talent, it is also incumbent upon us to play a role in developing that talent.
Thank you so much, all of the panelists. This has been such a very inspiring and upbeat session in the sense that we have two countries that have really provided a lot of leadership and mentorship in the digital agenda, as we've also heard from the Commission, and looking forward to more dynamism from the region. We've heard from the company perspective, hearing about the importance of the ecosystem and the strength of the ecosystem. And kind of a most important quote that I love was the talent with also the heart and soul and the breadth, which is very important. Yes, before we hand over to Lene, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I just want to agree what you both have said, that of course our region has played a great role and still has huge potential, but if we look at where we have the bottleneck or the biggest worry, then I agree that education or the volume of education of ICT specialists is one issue, and the possibilities for cooperation between our countries, but also with big companies such as Microsoft or others is a vital thing to have. As was mentioned, many of the ICT companies are willing to hire thousands of, or at least hundreds of workers tomorrow. To have people with higher education in ICT, in programming, is a vital thing to have. But in ICT knowledge, I only mean programming, because simply using computer is not ICT knowledge anymore. My daughter, who is 5, started using iPad before she started writing, and this is normal in today's world. Yes. And I really believe that technology has helped us using technology, because I'm still from the generation of using MS-DOS in my childhood, and MS-DOS, you remember, was rather complicated. Now Windows, much better, and some others.
Lots of others
also rather good, especially using the pads. So I think this is something we should really focus on and to have lots of cooperation on. And also the other point that was made in regards of making processes simpler is a very valid point. I think just putting PDFs to online, this is not making things digital. Making digital means that for the citizen, but also for the government, the data is there so that you can actually build on that. If you ask something from the citizen, the next state authority shouldn't be asking the same. They should know if they have the permission to know, but not just simply putting PDFs online. This is not making things digital, of course.
A final, this is so inspiring. Everyone has something.
No, I just want to take that to the next level. And I think there was a question about what's the equivalent of the man to the moon sort of strategy. I just want to share an example from the recent past in our own context. In Copenhagen, the city of Copenhagen has this pretty interesting public procurement policy now, which is sort of this public-private innovation partnerships kind of model. And I think it relates to driving the right kind of demand and the right kind of setups, including those measures and KPIs that you put in place, because I think the governments, no matter where they are, have an unbelievable amount of influence in the right kind of demand. And I just want to mention that today, because this is probably the right audience to see how to create that kind of intelligent demand in the system that sort of drives these new innovations based on these kind of infrastructural capabilities, whether it's high-speed broadband or new kind of APIs and data formats and access and all that stuff. So for small companies to flourish in a huge ecosystem of many small, amazing companies as well as big companies, I think the right kind of demand has to be set. And it's really an interesting challenge, because I don't think we're going to send another man to the moon kind of idea here at this moment. So I think the equivalent of that today is this crowd, more or less, because you can set the equivalent momentum in the marketplace for that kind of demand.
Wolf-Dietrich, a final word before we hand the floor over to Lene?
If I may just to refer a particular aspect of e-skills, which we are measuring, of course, but I think what is important is not only to have the skills from high developed technicians in the ICT sectors that are designing products. you also need the literacy of the people then to use the products and to use the services.
This is self-evident in this region.
And exactly. Now, but I come to my second point. I mean, if you take then the literacy measurement, then of course, again, the Baltic countries, or the Baltic Sea region is very well scoring there. So literacy is high, and we also have a clear correlation between literacy and, for instance, then the use of the internet, and that also, of course, stimulates then also the demand side, the use of services, the use of e-government services, etc. That is, however, not the case everywhere in Europe so far. It has different reasons. This might be sort of even financing terminal equipments or traditional barriers that exist, but those also need to be overcome, and I think that's the point I wanted to make. In particular, if you are highly innovative with small, medium operators, you need the markets then for your products. So you need the literacy also in the others. It's not enough that you are the front runners here in literacy, because that will not give you the scale that you need. I mean, I learned in the preparation to this meeting that my son is playing one favorite play of a game of my son has been produced and developed in Finland. I didn't know that. So that shows there is a market, but you then need also the literacy everywhere. And there's one particular segment. I think the young people is not the problem, but not to forget the elderly people. I mean, those are the ones we also have, and there we have still a gap. We have to bring them on board, and this has a particular impact when you take, for instance, the whole area of e-health services, which is not only a nice tool, this is really saving money also for the public sector, because you can organize the health monitoring and the institutions of social security, etc., in a completely different way.
Thank you very much, Wolf-Dietrich. We promised Jørgen the last word. If you could be very brief, because there is still a surprise to come.
Yes.
The punchline.
I just want to make a few conclusions. I feel very good backup and support for working further with skills, SMEs, digitalization, both internationalization, but also on the skill set and helping SMEs, peer-to-peer and others. And I really hear great support of this. But I've left with a question that there are many initiatives, national and also Nordic, and in the Baltic region, Northern Future Forum, Nordic Innovation, and others. So I think the question to the group here and the audience is, what is it and where is it that the Baltic Development Forum, with the top of Europe, Digital Europe, where is it that we concretely can make a difference together? Where can we be better together? That's the question that I leave the stage with here, and we need to answer in the time to come.
That is the most perfect lead-in to Chairman Lene Espersen. Please come to the stage before someone else has something else to say. To talk to us about what the Baltic Development Forum has in mind and this new think tank.
Well, just a few minutes. But first and foremost, I would also like to thank all 6 of you. I kind of felt there was a bit of a competition here going on between Finland, Estonia, and Denmark. And you know, I got very happy when Wolf-Dietrich came up with the figures that we are not lagging behind in all areas. But I think competition is very good, very healthy. So that's all good. I would say that the conclusions and the political visions that you have envisaged here today perfectly fits into what we want to accomplish with a digital economy and our new think tank. One of the things that you have all said is that even though many things are going in the right direction, we need skills, we need talent, and that will be actually the first priority for the new think tank will be to see how can we develop these cross-border skills. I also must say that I was especially pleased with you, Prime Minister Katainen, that you said the most important topic for the new Commission, maybe expecting you to be part of it, will be to have a digital single market. So we will hold you accountable on that. And I very much enjoyed the Estonian Prime Minister Roivas when you said that the internet is a human right. Because this is what my kids keep telling me when they cannot get online with their computers. But you know, I almost felt like a dinosaur, because when I was studying at the university in the 80s, I learned to program in Fortran. And that's even before you, you know. We actually have the same birth date. You were just born a little bit after me, a little bit. But I think that it's very true that we have a high potential, but we need to do more cross-border activity. And I was a little bit envious that Denmark was not part of this digital wedding between Estonia and Finland. I don't think you should get divorced digitally, but maybe join others. I think that would be a very good idea. To you, Vinay, I also think that it was fantastic when you were mentioning the family, the friends, and the food. But of course, first and foremost, that the role of big companies is very important. I used to be Minister for Economic and Business, and I actually had the idea of this piggybacking, that if you want to drive innovation, you need the smaller companies and you need the bigger companies to help each other, because smaller companies sometimes need the strength of the bigger companies to move forward. But sometimes big companies have maybe gone into a state of not really moving, and the small companies can help them ahead. So I agree very much with you that that's also what's at stake here. To Craig, I'm so in agreement with you with regard to talent and skills, and Jørgen said the same thing. We are trying, I can tell you in Denmark, we're actually trying to digitalize our public schools in order to make that a tool also for putting more focus on talent. Because the smart kids tend to be the ones that are forgotten in school, and you focus on the ones that are having problems. So we will try to have focus on creating that talent. And again, Wolf-Dietrich, thanks a lot to you also about talking about how far the Commission actually is on this agenda. But we need to move even faster. I think that it's been an excellent way of finishing up this session. And I would just end up by saying to you that I hope that we together can formulate a vision putting the first woman on the digital moon. Yeah. I think that would be very great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lene.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all, Lene, all the panel. It's been a very dynamic and energizing session. There are 3 more parallel work sessions following this, and then there is a bus to take everyone to the party this evening, leaving this locale at 7 o'clock. We wish you a pleasant final set of working sessions, a wonderful evening tonight, and then we'll see you all tomorrow morning here at 9 a.m. Thank you very much.
Thanks.